National Press Club in Washington, D.C., I'm Lou Nescott Jr., host of Politics and Religion in America. Our guest today is the former and 60th chaplain of the U.S. House of Representatives, Father Pat Conroy. Father Conroy, welcome, and thanks for making time to speak with us today.
You're welcome.
On January 3rd of this year, you delivered your final prayer to the members of the House.
No.
I don't. No? Oh,
No.
Okay.
The prayer is to God.
Okay.
And the chaplain does not address Congress.
Interesting.
No, it's an important distinction that has implications.
How long did you serve in that capacity as chaplain?
It was 9 years, 8 months.
I know that early on in your studies, I read that you were a first-year law student at Gonzaga University and later at St. Louis University, and you set your sights on becoming a U.S. Senator. You made it to Washington, but not as a senator, as chaplain. Why the career switch?
The year in law school at Gonzaga was before I joined the Jesuits. My plan was law and politics. But that first year at Gonzaga is where I met the Jesuits, and my religious imagination was opened up to a possibility that I did not consider for myself of becoming a Jesuit, which I'd never thought of, or becoming a priest, because in my imagination, the image of priests that I was familiar with was not what I imagined for myself. So at Gonzaga, I met Jesuits who were regular people. They did regular things. And they're working on a college campus with young people, which I could imagine myself doing. The Jesuits opened my imagination, so I left law school at that point thinking I was leaving law and politics forever to join the Jesuits. It was the Jesuits who sent me back to law school. And it was the Jesuits, ultimately, my superior, who asked me to apply to be the chaplain of the House of Representatives. So when I interviewed and got the position, I was basically there because of holy obedience. My superior assigned me to seek that position.
I think many Americans would be surprised to learn that the U.S. House of Representatives and U.S. Senate have chaplains. Are there traditions behind those positions?
The chaplaincy predates the Constitution of the United States. It was in, 1776, 77. So in the 1760s, one of the Continental Congresses, Benjamin Franklin, of all people, when they were coming to impasses, suggested that perhaps we should invoke the assistance of the divine. And so a local Anglican minister named Douchet, with a T, D-O-U-C-H-E-T, I think, you can look that up, gave the first invocation, which you can also look up. And it was quite inclusive. It was all Christian, but it was a pretty good chaplain's prayer for the time, I'd say. And they continued to have an opening prayer so that when the Constitution was finally written, first order of business was the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. All right, so the same people that wrote the First Amendment, Congress shall establish no religion, shall pass no law establishing religion, nor preventing the free exercise thereof, which is the phrase of that most Americans don't remember. They don't remember it.
What would you say to someone who would argue that chaplains in the U.S. House and Senate represent a violation of the First Amendment, particularly the Establishment Clause separating church and state?
People that wrote that had elected a chaplain. They didn't seem to think there was a problem here.
Interesting.
So, if you're an American that thinks this is a problem, we have a problem, with the establishment of religion. Okay, amend the Constitution.
Your first day on Capitol Hill, when you went to your office, did you find a job description for your position?
Well, over time, the position evolved in this sense. For the first 140 years or something, every chaplain's term was for the term of the Congress. Mm-hmm. So it was 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then they got somebody else. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, it was usually somebody local.
Right.
So here they are in a new city, Philadelphia, but when they get here in 1800, it's a new city. And there are a few churches. Right. And so-and-so from the First Presbyterian, whatever, was the, local, just local. And if you think about it, it's like nobody was casting far and wide to hire somebody for 2 years. That's not how things work, So
there was nothing written down that you pulled out of a drawer and said, "These are your tasks." And
oh well, no. That the task is the rules of the House of Representatives,
okay.
Which in the first article of the Constitution, it's not even Bill of Rights. First article: the legislature shall have the power to appoint its own officers. Okay. And the chaplain is an officer of the House.
One of the central tasks of chaplain is to write and deliver the opening prayers before the start of each legislative session. Let's talk about that part of your job for a moment.
Everyone began with, "Thank you, God, for giving us another day."
Right. From your unique perspective as chaplain and a lawyer, how did you view the work of lawmakers and the process of lawmaking, which some people equate to sausage making, messy, time-consuming, and seemingly endless?
Well, I graduated college in 72. Mm-hmm. My thing was poli-sci. I knew how it all worked from my studies.
Sure.
And so I got there in 2011. So, what does that tell you? That's 40 years. It is slow and tedious, and it is not worth watching. As a matter of fact, don't watch it. Turn off C-SPAN. Now, people think, no, then they're doing secret, we need to watch. No. What C-SPAN does is every politician's playing to the camera. They're not doing their job. You've elected these people, trust them to do their work. Don't stand over their shoulder and tell them how to do their work, because then it's sauces being made by the community. That's what representative government is. It's not the mob. Groupthink is the worst kind of think. When you're talking about having to do stuff that needs to get done.
Right.
You delegate that to the people whose job it is to do it. We've lost that, I think, in our these days. And chalk it up to social media, chalk it up to whatever, 24/7 news cycle, chalk it up to all that. It's like, but
do you see on another plane the work of lawmakers as a necessarily moral, religious, or secular enterprise?
Well, it's not a religious enterprise, but the person's engaged in politics, the person's engaged in education, the person's engaged in everything. Mm-hmm. In the best of worlds, should be engaging in discernment of their own gifts and their own talents, and actually, if they are gifted, if you will, by God to do politics, they should be doing politics, which the purpose of politics is providing for the common good. Pope Francis said that to Congress when he came and spoke to Congress. Your work is holy work if It's for the common good.
But that sounds like a religious imperative almost, isn't it?
It's a moral imperative.
Okay. Okay.
Well, yeah, it's religious for those who are religious, but it's like, no, the rest of you, all of us, whether or not we're religious, our work, all of our work should be for the common good. Educators, you're educating for the common good. Yeah, I mean, healthcare for the common good, all of it. So whether or not you're religious, it's a human value, a societal value. One hopes everybody sees that, but we don't, right? I mean,
common good with a moral or even a spiritual dimension. So,
which, by the way, is also in Congress shall provide for the defense, the national defense, and the common welfare.
it's there.
Same phrase, succeeding phrases. I'd say one party, but maybe everybody knows all about the defense one. They know about the defense part.
Funding of it. Yeah, but
Yeah,
not
the funding of the defense part, but not the funding of the common welfare.
So let's talk about the funding of the common welfare in the context of a political campaign. In the 2020 general election, then candidate Biden, who served 36 years in the Senate, I don't know if you ever had the chance to meet.
I knew him in 1990. He had a son at Georgetown when I was there.
He said that this election in 2020 was, quote, about the battle for the soul of America. In your mind, what do you think he meant?
Well, what were the American values filling the streets?
Okay. That's it. Fill in the blanks.
Racial justice, heavily divided country on whether or not we have it or need it.
But what about those other American values? Independence, self-reliance, initiative, the entrepreneurial spirit. Don't those count?
Think so. The myth of rugged individualism. Donald Trump is a populist. And when he says America first, and Denmark should be first to the Danes, and Norway should be first for the Norwegians, and Bangladesh should be first for the Bangladesh. I mean, he doesn't even
A nationalist, realist.
Well, as if all nations are equally blessed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically, we got the most, we should be able to keep it.
Is it fair to say, though, it's interesting what you just mentioned about former President Trump, that he reached out to a segment of the population that's been studied, dissected, and reported on, and there seem to be some common, not just demographic features, but features of income and sense of being forgotten and left out of the political process, right? Which seems to be based upon what you said in answering in your comments a few moments ago, the antithesis of the American dream of inclusion, right? I mean, do you think that was that explains at least part of his base and why they listened and ultimately voted for the former president?
The notion just baffles me, considering the history of who has actually been forgotten by our system from day one. And it isn't white people.
Who is it?
Well, blacks, African slaves for the first 70 years, mm-hmm. and black people for the next 50 through Jim Crow. Any person of color, the Chinese on the West Coast, the Italians coming in, and then the Germans coming in, then the Irish coming in. I mean, there's always been a nativist thing about the rights and privileges of those who, were in charge.
Earlier this summer, a group of 60 Catholic House Democrats released a statement of principles linking their personal faith to public policy and, by extension, lawmaking. What do you make of this statement?
I would say, certainly when I was there, the Republicans in Congress wore their religion much more on their sleeve than Democrats did. Just it's a different in cultures,
Right.
just cultures. It's not a value statement. But the Republicans, for example, when they go on their planning retreats, I went both parties. There's grace before every meal,
Interesting.
and a different member wanting to say
What would
grace.
Democrats do? Would they say grace?
No.
Why? Do you have any?
They don't wear it on the sleeve. It's a different culture. I don't know how else to say that.
Right.
That doesn't sound. It's much more.
Internal.
Well, the kind of person who votes Republican, the kind of person who finds himself more a Republican than a Democrat, believes in that, believes that you start everything with a prayer.
Right.
I mean, it's not an accident that the South is Republican, that the South lives and breathes that kind of religious culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a major part of Southern community life, that it's not in the North, in the Northeast, and certainly not in the Northwest.
Are you making a judgment call here, though, or are you just simply saying that's the way it is? It's cultural.
It's the fact. It's the fact.
Cultural fact. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's not a judgment call. It's a preference thing. And anecdotally, I had two friends in Congress, opposite parties, that were always sat together in the middle. And both of them, by my lights looking at them, were kind of on the fringe of their respective parties. I mean, they weren't within the power structures. And the Republican asked the Democrat, when you guys get together, do you start every gathering with Pledge of Allegiance? No. You start with a prayer? No. And the Republican says, God, I got to start meeting with you guys. Because there was a guy that wasn't from that culture, though politically he was a Republican. But he's the exception. The Constitution of the United States guarantees Catholic practice. Mormon, Jewish, everything. All right, guarantees that. The Catholic Church in America has blossomed. It's dead in Europe.
Right.
But here, no, fully alive. It's fully alive. We're going to benefit from what the Constitution does for us. We cannot demand that the Constitution teach Catholicism. No, we're very Catholic in how we are Americans. Let me explain what that means. That means that when the Constitution under which our church has thrived, guarantees a woman's right to choose, it is within that context that we should, as Catholics, be doing the best we can to help her make the choice we want her to make, right, rather than saying, you can't make that choice.
Forcing her into a back room.
Yes, and that has never been the public debate. How do we, within the constitutional system that we have, how do we get to our Catholic value, in this case, Catholic value,
as an example,
of women choosing, having the right to choose, which, by the way, I want to know the American that thinks that the government should take away their choice in any area of their life. Any area of their life. It is an American value that each one of us can choose where our life is going. Happens to be a Catholic value too, that we should all use our gifts and our talents and our intelligence as best we can to make the best choices we have the freedom to make. Sometimes we don't have the freedom to make really important choices because of fear, because of oppression, because of poverty, because of all kinds of things. So these are choice, if you will. This is not American debate, right? This is not the way the church is talking about. But choice is a highly American value, and it's a church value. Thomas Aquinas says, if your conscience tells you to do something that the church says is a sin, you are bound to follow your conscience. That's Thomas Aquinas. Okay, so a good Catholic in our system could be saying, given that women in our system have this constitutional right, our task as fellow Christians or as Catholics is to make it possible for her to optimize her ability to make the choice for life. So we want to fund programs, we want to establish administrative agencies so that every woman would choose life. Let's put our national resources there rather in trying to pass laws that limit a woman's right to her constitutional right. I mean, that's never been articulated because it's a death knell. I mean, it is, but that's really kind of what it is. So these Catholic Democrats,
the 60 Catholic Democrats
yes,
that came out who are trying to make that case. You feel,
yeah,
listen, constitutionally, we adhere to the Constitution, but that doesn't preclude faith from entering, in this case, as practicing Catholics, our lawmaking, sausage-making process.
And a recognition that, sorry bishops, sorry Catholics, sorry conservative, everybody else, this is a constitutional right. So you don't want women to have this constitutional right, amend the Constitution. But since it's a constitutional right, let's do everything we can so that these women make the choice we all say we want them to make. So a pro-choice Democrat is not a pro-abortion person. But the debate has snatched that. And so immediately, any pro-choice Democrat is judged as pro-abortion. I don't know a single one who would be. But that's the sad state of the debate. But if you understand our constitutional system, I believe, if you understand how this works, then you adjust how you pass the laws to make sure women choose life. That's how you do it in our system.
There have been moments when a seemingly non-political prayer becomes, well, highly political, right? In an interview last January with the Religious News Service, you stated that during the Tea Party wave in 2011, you stated that you could not use the word cooperation in your prayers because, quote, that would have been seen as a political statement, unquote. Why?
Because that wave of Tea Party people came in with the resolve not to engage the other side. Newt Gingrich did that in 1994. We're not talking to the Democrats. We're doing everything. And this was kind of a resurrection of that. New Congress people on the Republican side were told they were not to talk to Democrats. Now, that could publicly be denied, but I heard that from new congressmen.
What other words over the course of your career have you been, for lack of a better term, banned from using in prayers? Words like cooperation.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't told don't use that. Cooperation, I would have thought compromise would have been the word I used, because compromise was the mortal. That was the no-no word.
That
compromise.
was even worse than cooperation, compromise.
Oh yeah, you're compromising your principles.
Right.
You're giving up everything you stand for to get something done.
So cooperation, compromise, at least.
And that's the sausage making. That's the sausage making. I mean, the reason we have a constitution that allowed for 3/5 of a black person to be counted was an immoral compromise. Why? Because we wanted to establish a union. That's why we're willing to do that ghastly thing so that we can become a country. Yeah, I mean, it's in our DNA. And so when you come in and say we're not compromising
Cooperation, compromise.
and when the public who does not know the history and does not understand these things is demanding, do not go in there and talk with someone from the other party. The people getting elected think they have their marching
you know
orders. Yes. You've got your marching orders. Don't talk to the other side. Period.
And yet, on another occasion in 2018, then Speaker Paul Ryan attempted to remove you as House chaplain for reasons that were not abundantly clear. At the time, the New York Times reported that a prayer you delivered on tax equity, where you said, quote, there should be no winners and losers under new tax laws, end quote, might have been the source of Speaker Ryan's ire.
Paul Ryan never had ire against me. So even that reporting's
What did he have?
alarm that when members of his conference told him that I was no longer ministering to them effectively, that I was not available to them for any counseling. And that alarmed him. And he was unaware of that. He's like, oh. And so, concerned about it, he asked me to resign. He didn't ask other questions of other people.
Did he ever reference, though, that some of your...
No, that was the reference. The reference was there were those in my conference who
felt that you were too political?
No, I wasn't available to them.
Okay. What did that mean?
I was Catholic. So why do I say that? Because when one of them was asked, because he was immediately on a committee to find the next chaplain, well, what are you looking for in the next chaplain? And he says, he spoke the truth. Someone who is married and has an experience of family life.
Interesting.
Who does that exclude? I mean, he came right out and said it. That's the truth. He came out and spoke the truth. And everybody said, well, that means not Catholic. Well, no, I don't mean that. That's exactly what he meant. He was speaking the truth.
You also generated headlines in 2019 in a prayer that CNN described as reminiscent of the Catholic rite of exorcism. On that day, you saw, quote, darker spirits at play in the people's house. And you went on to, quote, cast out all spirits of darkness from this chamber, spirits not from you, which I presume you were referring to members of the house.
The energies that were at play that week were not coming from...
So talk to me about those energies. I mean...
They were coming from the 16 blocks away.
Well, what were their circumstances that prompted that particular prayer? Was it about immigration?
No, it was about racism. Nancy Pelosi came in and offered a resolution to censure or to the racist comments coming from the president. Something like that. It was something like that. And all chaos broke loose. The motions started draw down. The speaker has called the president of the United States a racist. And it just got uglier and uglier and uglier. And I did not sense, I could have been wrong, but I did not sense that there were any members of Congress about whom this was an argument they wanted to have. That it was just, everything just got hijacked. And for a day, it was like, we can't believe we're all caught up in this. He said, how'd we get here? That's how it felt to me. And everybody at the end of that day was like, God, this was awful. Didn't start with them.
I was going to ask how members responded. It sounds like they wanted to hide.
Well, they were like, what? I mean, because it was the staffers that jumped. Because they're the ones that know the rules. A lot of congressmen don't know the rules.
But they do.
Oh, the staffers do. Right, immediately they're jumping up on the Republican side, and the member stops. And, Mr. Speaker, I move to strike the words. So it was on, like administratively. And all of a sudden, the parliamentarian was the most important person in that room. And he was for the next, it was about 8 hours. Everybody was talking with the parliamentarian, not the members. It was all the staffers, because they knew the issues. They knew what was at stake. They knew, and the members of Congress were, like they're walking over to one another. Do you know what's going on? I don't know what's going on. I mean, that's what it looked like. So the members weren't upset. I didn't sense that the membership was upset, but it was a dark day. In terms of...
Did the prayer work? Were the darker, in your view, spirits exorcised from the chamber?
I don't know if a single prayer worked. Vaccines had just been, they were just emerging and had yet to have been politicized. Everybody was like, oh, God, thank God we're getting vaccines.
Right.
It wasn't politicized yet.
Okay.
But that was as much, pay attention, folks. I'm praying for something that we Americans have been praying for and benefiting from since our beginning, the peaceful transfer of power.
Were there forces at play that you saw that might pose a threat to the peaceful transfer of power, hence your prayer to God to continue with the peaceful?
Well, there were already people, armed white people, commandeering state houses. Now,
Michigan.
Right, but yeah. Walking around, thank you, I have a right to do this. If any of them were black, what do you think would have happened?
Is it part of a house chaplain's job to provide pastoral care to members upon request?
One saw it.
Are there, in providing that care, are there red lines that you could never cross in either admonishing or endorsing a member's political beliefs or behavior?
I think there should be. One of the things that I learned very early on, and I learned this from the members, was they did not want from their chaplain more political input, nor political evaluation, nor political judgment. That is not what they want from the chaplain, nor need.
I want to turn finally to January 6th. You delivered your final opening prayer to the House on January 3rd, just 3 days before the insurrection. What was the key message that you sought to offer? I seem to recall that in the closing of your prayer, you asked for forgiveness from God and from the American people for tasks that Congress, the 116th, did not accomplish.
Or failed at.
What were some of the primary?
I had nothing in mind. I had the human condition in mind and a desire that we be truly, as Americans and as American legislators, humble enough to admit we weren't perfect and there's still more to do. So it's just. I think it's just an acknowledgement of the human condition. I was not thinking of any one person or any one piece of legislation or not. I tried all of my prayers. I tried to be that generic. At the time of the tax, when the tax prayer was, obviously that's what everybody was focused on. And my prayer is that the tax reform would benefit all Americans. Now, were there some who thought that was a partisan prayer? I'd like to say, okay, come out and admit that publicly, that you don't want to pass a law that benefits all Americans.
So then Speaker Ryan's not ire, but alarm, which seems to move more closer to ire in some cases. Where were you when you first heard the news the Capitol had been overrun? Do you remember?
Yeah, I was in my bedroom at Gonzaga High School still.
What were your immediate thoughts?
I suppose I could see this coming. Anybody that day who didn't see this coming, You've been living under a rock? I mean, the virulence of it, I was, oh my God, really? And then, well, of course, the coverage of it, pictures of peaceful Americans walking through the Capitol. This is just, these are Americans. They're in the capital of the United States, and it's just fine. You don't get into the capital of the United States on any day without going through security. These people did not go through security. I don't care if they're peacefully walking through the Capitol or not. They're violating the law. Some stations were not reporting that. There's where we are. It's like the American people are being had, and they're proud of it. I'm thinking, well, here we are. Here we are.
In the hours and days following the insurrection, did you reach out directly to members of the House, the Capitol Police Force, or Capitol staff? Did anyone at the Capitol reach out directly to you?
No, we're shut down.
Okay, but no.
I was in quarantine because there was a Jesuit in the community with COVID. I mean, one of the first cases in the city. They had their chaplain.
Had you found yourself standing in the House on, let's just say, January 7th, the day after the insurrection, what would you have prayed that day?
It would be a similar prayer to the one, which, by the way, is not like the Catholic exorcism rite at all, because that's a mysterious thing. And okay, so we haven't seen this a lot. Maybe it's a Catholic thing. No, it was a Christian thing. If you're baptized, you can pray to cast out evil spirits. That's your baptism.
And that would have been
But it would have been, Lord, we've had a terrible spirit in this building. Send your spirit of peace and of reconciliation, of healing to a place in bad need of it.
The start of a new year is less than a week away, yet we remain in the grips of a pandemic that won't let us go, and a political discourse in this country that not only seems to invite but embrace violence. Some might even suggest that there is an apocalyptic end-of-days feel to the times in which we now live. Do you agree?
I'm not an apocalyptic person. Paul was waiting for the second coming and it didn't come. And there have been prophets throughout the ages, including in the 20th century, predicting the day is all going to be over. Maybe it will, but not predictably. God's going to do what God's going to do if that's going to happen. Apocalyptic thought, those notions, pouring that out into the public discourse drums up fear. There are a lot of people banking on Americans continuing to be filled with fear. Politically, they're banking on it. I think economically, they're banking on it. It sells newspapers, it gets viewers, all this, they're all negative energies. They don't build towards a positive future. And it's like, and in that sense, if you want to talk about spirit, it's a dark spirit would have us live in fear. In Jesus' talk, when he first appears after the resurrection, do not fear. It's the first thing he says like 5 times. Do not fear. If you're afraid of the apocalypse, amend your life. John the Baptist, we've just been reading about it, for Advent. Prepare the way of the Lord. If you're afraid of the end, repent. Stop being afraid. Stop looking for enemies. Stop judging other people. Stop being angry. Just seek peace. Seek reconciliation. Forgive. Seek forgiveness. All of these are positive energy things. If it's the end, listen to John. Prepare the way of the Lord. So when the Lord comes, he'll recognize the place. You know, it's like, oh, good work. Good work. You prepared the way for me. You prepared it by healing people, helping people, forgiving people, lifting people up. Stop the judgment. Stop the anger. Stop the blame.
Father Conroy, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us. I'm Lou Nescott Jr. We look forward to seeing you for our next episode of Politics and Religion in America. From the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Good night.